So getting back to our top story and Ottawa's plan to transition from emission-free vehicles, let's go to Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Janice, thank you for your patience. I know you're waiting for that press conference. The government wants to phase out gas-powered cars in 11 years. Can they do that?
Well, they've certainly laid out some ambitious targets. Now, when we're talking years here, these are model years, not calendar years. But by the time they get to the 2026 model year for new vehicle sales in this country, they want 20% of them to be either zero-emission vehicles or at the very least plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. By 2030, their goal is to get to 60% of all new vehicle sales. And then by 2035, and this is sort of the thing that is perhaps most controversial, they want 100% all new vehicles sold in this country to be either electric vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, or plug-in hybrids. Now, the addition of the plug-in hybrid, you might say that's not exactly a zero-emission vehicle if you still have gas as a backstop for your vehicle. But range anxiety in a country where you have so many rural, remote, northern communities, that is a thing in Canada. What they're doing is offering a credit, an equal to credit, if that plug-in hybrid has a range of 80 kilometers just on the charge alone. And if the amount that you can drive on the charge alone is less than 80, but over 35 kilometers, I believe, you can get kind of a part credit in this new system. There's also other early action credits for manufacturers that in their fleet for model years 2024 and 25 are kind of first up, fast movers in this to offer electric vehicles to the Canadian market. And there's also other credits available if they invest in charging infrastructure. That is a big issue for people who are anxious about buying new electric cars. Can you charge it if you leave home? Stephen Guilbeault today making the point, most people, 80% charge at home, but what if you don't have a laneway? What if you live in a building where you don't have a plug-in in your kind of shared parking garage? And of course, what happens when you leave home and drive farther away to a place that doesn't have convenient charging? Stephen Guilbeault telling reporters today that he believes these are realistic targets, pointing out that in BC and Quebec, places that already put some targets in place already, they're at the 20% target for new vehicle sales, saying that for Canada as a whole, 1 in 8 new vehicle sales now are in the most recent quarter anyway, have been electric vehicles. But what do you do when you have jurisdictions that aren't on board with this? I took note of a news release just out in the last hour from Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith, not holding back her words, saying this shows a, quote, total disregard for the well-being of Canadians, unilaterally imposing an unconstitutional edict with a bizarrely impossible wait time, calling it sheer hypocrisy, on and on. And of course, she has a fight right now with the federal government over the electricity grid and Alberta's ability to match the federal electricity regulations. But this statement, concludes by saying Canadians deserve more than destructive virtue signaling regulations and unachievable targets, and so on, from Danielle Smith. It raises a question, though, speaking of Conservatives, what happens? These new regs come in. Industry needs certainty if it's going to make billion-dollar investments and make this technological shift. What happens if you have a change in government to one of a more conservative stripe? Pierre Poilievre has said he would not stick to this, that he would not force people to spend their money only on electric vehicles down the road. Stephen Guilbeault asked by a reporter about that very question. Take a listen.
Well, as you know, in life, the only two guarantees are taxes and death. And that's especially true in a democracy. A newly elected government could choose to do things differently. When it comes to Pierre Poilievre's Conservative government, they're anti anything having to do with clean air, clean water, and climate change. They would put an end to all of the support we have for Canadians purchasing electric vehicles.
So, Janice, there is some pushback from the automotive industry in this plan, to this plan too. What are we hearing from it?
Yeah, really encouraging the government to tap the brakes on these targets, making the point that, for example, when they talk about federal incentives of $5,000, you compare that to the cost of the hybrid or electric version of what's popular in Canada, which is SUVs and trucks. That does not bridge the gap for lower income households and make that vehicle affordable in the first place, regardless of the fact that they could save money on charging versus gas fill-ups or maintenance down the road. And also this question about range range anxiety, whether the government at different levels of government are doing enough to really get a charging infrastructure in this country to support these sales targets. You also have to consider, and earlier today on News Network, the head of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, Flavio Volpe, was making the point that because China is so far ahead, because they were leaders on battery technology, a lot of the electric vehicles on the road now are actually not built in North America. We have been signing trade agreements to build up and protect our North American supply chains for automotive. Does this run counter to that? Here's Flavio Volpe.
You know, perhaps the objective here is to have the greenest fleet, which is noble. But if you're getting those products made in processes in countries that have incredible carbon emission in making them, what's the point?
What's the point? You know, Canada has a clean grid. They are trying to make the point that you have to take a very big picture look at this, but data doesn't lie. We have a quick chart here just to close with, Hannah. This is the reality. In the first 10 months, new vehicle sales in Canada, this is in dollar values, you see China coming in there, growing at a rate of 362% year over year, and actually the number of vehicles coming up from the US down a little bit year over year. I'm told that this is largely because of all the Teslas coming from the big gigafactory that they have built in Shanghai. All those Teslas you see on the streets in Canada, more and more, coming from China. So this has been a big boon for Chinese imports, even as it is an aspect of government policy intended to reduce carbon emissions.
Interesting facts. Always appreciate your time, Janice.
You're welcome.